Book 3. The Lord of the Western approaches. The sun rose on the flawless brimming sea, into a sky all brazen, all one brightening, for gods immortal, and for mortal men, on ploughlands kind with grain. And facing sunrise, the voyagers now lay off Pylos town, compact stronghold of Neleus. On the shore, black bulls were being offered by the people to the blue-maned god who makes the islands tremble. 9 congregations, each 500 strong, led out 9 bulls apiece to sacrifice, taking the tripes to eat, while on their altars thigh bones and fat lay burning for the god. Here they put in furled sail and beached the ship, but Telemachus hung back in disembarking, so that Athena turned and said, "Not the least shyness now, Telemachus. You came across the open sea for this, to find out where the great earth hides your father, and what the doom was that he came upon. Go to old Nestor, master charioteer, so we may broach the storehouse of his mind. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies." But clear-headed Telemachus replied, "Mentor, how can I do it? How approach him? I have no practice in the elaborate speeches, and for a young man to interrogate an old man seems disrespectful." But the grey-eyed goddess said, "Reason and heart will give you words, Telemachus, and a spirit will counsel others. I should say, the gods were never indifferent to your life." She went on quickly, and he followed her, to where the men of Pylos had their altars. Nestor appeared enthroned amongst his sons, while friends around them skewered the red beef, or held it scorching. When they saw the strangers, a hail went up, and all that crowd came forward, calling out invitations to the feast. Pisistratos in the lead, the young prince, caught up their hands in his, and gave them places on curly lambskins, flat on the sea sand, near Thrasymedes, his brother and his father. He passed them bits of the food of sacrifice, and pouring wine in a golden cup, he said to Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, "Friend, I must ask you to invoke Poseidon. You find us at this feast, kept in his honor. Make the appointed offering then, and pray, and give the honey wine cup to your friend, so he may do the same. He too must pray to the gods, on whom all men depend. But he is just my age, you are the senior, so here, I give the goblet first to you." And he put the cup of sweet wine in her hand. Athena liked his manners, and the equity that gave her precedence with the cup of gold, so she besought Poseidon at some length, "Earthshaker, listen and be well disposed. Grant your petitioners everything they ask. Above all, honor Nestor and his sons. Second, to every man of Pylos town, a fair gift in exchange for this hecatomb. Third, may Telemachus and I perform the errand on which last night we put to sea." This was the prayer of Athena, granted in every particular by herself. She passed the beautiful wine cup to Telemachus, who tipped the wine and prayed as she had done. Meanwhile, the spits were taken off the fire, portions of crisp meat for all. They feasted, and when they had eaten and drunk their fill, at last they heard from Nestor, prince of charioteers. "Now is the time," he said, "for a few questions, now that our young guests have enjoyed their dinner. Who are you strangers? Where are you sailing from? And where to? Down the highways of sea water. Have you some business here? Or are you now reckless wanderers of the sea, like those corsairs who risk their lives to prey on other men?" Clear-headed, Telemachus responded cheerfully, for Athena gave him heart. By her design, his quest for news about his father's wandering would bring him fame in the world's eyes. So he said, "Nestor, pride of Achaeans, Neleus's son, you ask where we are from, and I can tell you. Our home port is under Mount Nion, Ithaca. We are not here on Ithacan business though, but on my own. I want news of my father Odysseus, known for his great heart, and I will comb the wide world for it. People say he fought along with you when Troy was taken. As to the other men who fought that war, we know where each one died, and how he died, but Zeus allotted my father death and mystery. No one can say for sure where he was killed, whether some hostile landsman or the sea, the storm waves on the deep sea, got the best of him. And this is why I come to you for help. Tell me of his death, sir, if perhaps you witnessed it, or have heard some wanderer tell the tale. The man was born for trouble. Spare me no part of it for kindness' sake, but put the scene before me as you saw it. If ever Odysseus, my noble father, served you by promise kept, or work accomplished in the land of Troy, where you Achaeans suffered, recall those things for me, the way they were. Then Nestor, prince of charioteers, made answer, Dear friend, you take me back to all the trouble we went through in that country. We Achaeans, rough days aboard ship on the cloudy sea, cruising away for pillage after Achilles, rough days of battle around Priam's town, our losses, then so many good men gone. Ares, great Aias lies there, Achilles lies there, Patroclus too, the wondrous counsellor, and my own strong and princely son, Antilochus, fastest man of them all, and a born fighter, other miseries, and many, we endured there. Could any mortal man tell the whole story? Not if you stayed 5 years or 6 to hear how hard it was for the flower of the Achaeans. You'd go home weary, and the tale untold. Think, we were there 9 years, and we tried everything, all stratagems against them. Up to the bitter end that Zeus begrudged us. And as to stratagems, no man would claim Odysseus's gift for those. He had no rivals, your father, at the tricks of war. Your father, well, I must say, I marvel at the sight of you. Your manner of speech couldn't be more like his. One would say no boy could speak so well. And all that time at Ilion, he and I were never at odds in council or assembly, saw things the same way, had one mind between us in all the good advice we gave the Argives. But when we plundered Priam's town and tower, we took to the ships. God scattered the Achaeans. He had a mind to make homecoming hard for them, seeing they would not think straight, nor behave, or some would not. So evil days came on them, and she who had been angered, Zeus's dangerous grey-eyed daughter, did it, starting a fight between the sons of Atreus. First they were fools enough to call assembly at sundown, unheard of hour. The Achaean soldiers turned out, soaked with wine, to hear talk about it from their commanders. Menelaus harangued them to get organized. Time to ride home on the sea's broad back, he said. But Agamemnon wouldn't hear it. He wanted to hold the troops, make sacrifice at a hecatomb, something to pacify Athena's rage. Folly again, to think that he could move her. Will you change the will of the everlasting gods in a night or a day's time? The two men stood there hammering at each other till the army got to its feet with a roar, and no decision, wanting it both ways. That night no one slept well, everyone cursing someone else. Here was the bane from Zeus. At dawn we dragged our ships to the lordly water, stowed aboard all our plunder, and the slave women in their low hip girdles. But half the army elected to stay behind, with Agamemnon as their corps commander. The other half embarked and pulled away. We made good time. The huge sea smoothed before us, and held our rights when we reached Tenedos, being wild for home. But Zeus, not willing yet, now cruelly set us at odds a second time, and one lot turned, put back in the rolling ships, under command of the subtle captain, Odysseus. Their notion was to please Lord Agamemnon, not I. I fled with every ship I had. I knew fate had some devilment brewing there. Diomedes roused his company and fled too, and later Menelaus, the red-haired captain, caught up with us at Lesbos, while we mulled over the long sea route, unsure whether to lay our course northward of Chios, keeping the Isle of Syria off to port, or inside Chios, coasting by windy Mimas. We asked for a sign from heaven, and the sign came, to cut across the open sea to Euboea. And lose no time putting our reels behind us. The wind freshened astern, and the ships ran before the wind on paths of the deep-sea fish, making Geristos before dawn. We thanked Poseidon with many a charred thigh bone for that crossing. On the fourth day, Diomedes' company, under full sail, put in at Argos port, and I held on for Pylos. The fair wind, once heaven set it blowing, never failed. So this dear child was how I came from Troy, and saw no more of the others, lost or saved. But you are welcome to all I've heard since then at home. I have no reason to keep it from you. The Myrmidon spear fighters return, they say, under the son of lion-hearted Achilles, and so did Poeas' great son, Philoctetus. Idomeneus brought his company back to Crete. The sea took not a man from him, of all who lived through that long war. And even as far away as Ithaca, you've heard of Agamemnon, how he came home, how Aegisthus waited to destroy him, but paid a bitter price for it in the end. That is a good thing now, for a man to leave a son behind him, like the son who punished Aegisthus for the murder of his great father. You too are tall and well set up, I see. Be brave, you too, so men in times to come will speak well of you. Then Telemachus said, Nestor, pride of the Achaeans, Neleus' son, that was revenge, and far and wide the Achaeans will tell the tale in song for generations. I wish the gods would buckle his arms on me. I'd be revenged for outrage, on my insidious and brazen enemies, but no such happy lot was given to me, or to my father. Still, I must hold fast. To this, Lord Nestor of Gerenia said, My dear young friend, now that you speak of it, I hear a crowd of suitors for your mother lives with you, uninvited, making trouble. Now tell me how you take this. Do the people side against you, hearkening to some oracle? Who knows? Your father might come home some day alone, or backed by troops, and have it out with them. If grey-eyed Athena loved you, the way she did Odysseus in the old days, in Troy country, where we all went through so much, never have I seen the gods help any man as openly as Athena did your father. Well, as I say, if she cared for you that way, there would be those to quit this marriage game. But prudently, Telemachus replied, I can't think what you say will ever happen, sir. It is a dazzling hope, but not for me. It could not be, even if the gods willed it. At this, grey-eyed Athena broke in, saying, What strange talk you permit yourself, Telemachus. A god could save the man by simply wishing it, from the farthest shore in the world. If I were he, I should prefer to suffer years at sea, and then be safe at home. Better that than a knife at my hearthside, where Agamemnon found it, killed by adulterers. Though as for death, of course all men must suffer it. The gods may love a man, but they can't help him when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. Telemachus replied, Mentor, grievously though we miss my father, why go on as if that homecoming could happen? You know the gods had settled it already, years ago, when dark death came for him. But there is something else I imagine Nestor can tell us, knowing as he does the ways of men. They say his rule goes back over 3 generations, so long, so old, it seems death cannot touch him. Nestor, Neleus' son, true sage, say how did the lord of the great plains Agamemnon die? What was the trick Aegisthus used to kill the better man? And Menelaus, where was he? Not at Argos in Achaea, but blown off course, held up in some far country. Is that what gave the killer nerves to strike? Lord Nestor of Gerenia made answer, Well now, my son, I'll tell you the whole story, You know yourself what would have come to pass if red-haired Menelaus, back from Troy, had caught Aegisthus in that house alive. There would have been no burial mound for him, but dogs and carrion birds to huddle on him in the fields beyond the wall, and not a soul bewailing him for the great wrong he committed. While we were hard-pressed in the war at Troy, he stayed safe inland in the grazing country, making light talk to win Agamemnon's queen. But the lady Clytemnestra, in the first days, rebuffed him, being faithful still. Then too, she had at hand as her companion a minstrel Agamemnon left attending her, charged with her care, when he took ship for Troy. Then came the fated hour when she gave in. Her lover tricked the poet and marooned him on a bare island, for the sea-birds picking, and took her home, as he and she desired. Many thigh bones he burned on the gods' altars, and many a woven and golden ornament hung to bedeck them. In his satisfaction, he had not thought life held such glory for him. Now Menelaus and I sailed home together on friendly terms from Troy. But when we came off the Sunian point in Attica, the ship still running free, Anata's son, Phrontis, the steersman of Menelaus's ship, fell over with the death grip on the tiller. Some unseen arrow from Apollo hit him. No man handled a ship better than he did, in a high wind and sea. So Menelaus put down his longing to get on, and landed to give this man full honour and funeral. His own luck turned them, out on the wine-dark sea, in the murmuring hulls again. He made Cape Malea, but Zeus who views the wide world sent a gloom over the ocean, and a howling gale came on with seas increasing, mountainous, parting the ships and driving half toward Crete, where the Kydonians live by Iardanus river, off Gortyne's coastline in the misty sea there. A reef, a razorback, cuts through the water, and every westerly piles up a pounding surf along the left side, going towards Phaestus. Big seas buffeted back by the narrow stone. They were blown here, and fought in vain for sea room. The ships kept going into their destruction, slammed on the reef. The crews were saved, but now those 5 that weathered it got off to southward, taken by wind and current onto Egypt. And there Menelaus stayed. He made a fortune in sea traffic among those distant races, but while he did so, the foul crime was planned and carried out in Argos by Aegisthus, who ruled over the golden Mycenae 7 years. 7 long years, with Agamemnon dead, he held the people down before the vengeance. But in the 8th year, back from exile in Attica, Orestes killed the snake who killed his father. He gave his hateful mother and her soft man a tomb together, and proclaimed the funeral day a festal day for all the Argive people. That day, Lord Menelaus of the great war cry made port with all the gold his ships could carry. And this should give you pause, my son. Don't stay too long away from home, leaving your treasure there, and brazen suitors near. They'll squander all you have, or take it from you, and then how will your journey serve? I urge you, though, to call on Menelaus, he being but lately home from distant parts in the wide world. A man could well despair of getting home at all, if the winds blew him over the great South Sea, that weary waste. Even the wintering birds delay 1 winter more before the northward crossing. Well, take your ship and crew and go by water, or if you'd rather, go by land. Here are horses, a car, and my own sons for company, as far as the ancient land of Lacedaemon, and Menelaus, the red-haired captain there. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies. While Nestor talked, the sun went down the sky, and gloom came on the land. And now the grey-eyed goddess Athena said, Sir, this is almost welcome, and to the point, but why not slice the bull's tongue now, and mix libations for Poseidon and the gods? Then we can all retire. High time we did. The light is going under the dark world's rim. Better not linger at the sacred feast. When Zeus's daughters spoke, they turned to listen, and soon the squires brought water for their hands, while stewards filled the wine bowls, and poured out a fresh cup full for every man. The company stood up to fling their tongues in a shower of wine over the flames, then drank their thirst away. Now finally, Telemachus and Athena bestirred themselves, turning away to the ship. But Nestor put a hand on each, and said, "Now Zeus forbid, and the other gods as well, that you should spend the night on board, and leave me as though I was some pauper without a stitch. No blankets in the house, no piles of rugs, no sleeping soft for host or guest. Far from it. I have all these blankets and deep-piled rugs, and while I live, the only son of Odysseus will never make his bed on a ship's deck. No, not while sons of mine are left at home to welcome any guest who comes to us." The grey-eyed goddess Athena answered him, "You are very kind, sir, and Telemachus should do as you ask. That is the best thing. He will go with you, and will spend the night under your roof. But I must join our ship and talk to the crew, to keep their spirits up, since I am the only senior in the company. The rest are boys who shipped for friendship's sake, no older than Telemachus, any of them. Let me sleep out then, by the black hull's side, this night at least. At daybreak I'll be off to see the Corconians about a debt they owe me, an old one, and no trifle. As for your guest, send him off in a car with one of your sons, and give him thoroughbreds, a racing team." Even as she spoke, Athena left them, seeming a sea-hawk, in a clap of wings, and all the Achaeans of Pylos town looked up astounded. Awed then by what his eyes had seen, the old man took Telemachus' hand and said warmly, "My dear child, I can have no fears for you, no doubt about your conduct or your heart, if at your age the gods are your companions. Here we had someone from Olympus, clearly the glorious daughter of Zeus, his third child, who held your father dear among the Argives. O lady, hear me. Grant an illustrious name to me, and to my children, and my dear wife. A noble heifer shall be yours in sacrifice, one that no man has ever yoked or driven, my gift to you, her horns all sheathed in gold." So he ended praying, and Athena heard him. Then Nestor of Gerenia led them all, his sons and sons-in-law, to his great house, and in they went to the famous hall of Nestor, taking their seats on thrones and easy chairs, while the old man mixed water in a wine bowl with sweet red wine, mellowed 11 years before his housekeeper uncapped the jar. He mixed and poured his offering, repeating prayers to Athena, daughter of royal Zeus. The others made libation and drank deep. Then all the company went to their quarters, and Nestor of Gerenia showed Telemachus, under the echoing eastern entrance hall, to a fine bed near the bed of Pisistratos, captain of spearmen, his unmarried son. Then he lay down in his own inner chamber, where his dear faithful wife had smoothed his bed. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, Lord Nestor of Gerenia, charioteer, left his room for a throne of polished stone, white and gleaming, as though with oil, that stood before the main gate of the palace. Neleus here had sat before him, masterful in kingship. Neleus, long ago a prey to death, gone down to the night of the underworld. So Nestor held his throne and scepter now, lord of the western approaches to Achaea, and presently his sons came out to join him, leaving the palace. Echephron and Stratios, Perseus and Aratos, and Thrasymedes, and after them the prince Pisistratos, bringing Telemachus along with him. Seeing all present, the old Lord Nestor said, "Dear sons, here is my wish, and do it briskly, to please the gods. Athena first of all, my guest in daylight at our holy feast. One of you must go for a young heifer, and have the cowherd lead her from the pasture. Another call on Lord Telemachus' ship, to invite his crewmen, leaving 2 behind, and someone else again send for the goldsmith, Laerches, to gild the horns. The rest stay here together. Tell the servants a ritual feast will be prepared in hall. Tell them to bring seats, firewood, and fresh water." Before he finished, they were about these errands. The heifer came from pasture, the crewmen of Telemachus from the ship. The smith arrived, bearing the tools of his trade, hammer and anvil, and the precision tongs he handled fiery gold with. And Athena came as a god comes, numinous to the rites. The smith now gloved each horn in a pure foil beaten out of the gold that Nestor gave him, a glory and delight for the goddess's eyes, while Echephron and Stratius held the horns. Aratus brought clear, lustral water, in a bowl quivering with fresh-cut flowers, a basket of barley in his other hand. Thrasymedes, who could stand his ground in war, stood ready with a sharp two-bladed axe for the stroke of sacrifice, and Perseus held a bowl for the blood. And now Nestor, strewing the barley grains and water drops, pronounced his invocation to Athena, and burned a pinch of bristles from the victim. When prayers were said, and all the grain was scattered, great-hearted Thrasymedes, in a flash, swung the axe, at one blow, cutting through the neck tendons. The heifer's spirit failed. Then all the women gave a wail of joy, daughters, daughters-in-law, and the lady Eurydice, Clemenos's eldest daughter. But the men still held the heifer, shored her up for the wide earth, where the living go their ways, until Pisistratos cut her throat across. The black blood ran, and life ebbed from her marrow. The carcass now sank down, and they disjointed shoulder and thigh bone, wrapping them in fat, 2 layers folded with raw strips of flesh. These offerings Nestor burned on the split-wood fire, and moistened with red wine. His sons took up 5 tined forks in their hands, while the altar flame ate through the bones, and bits of tripe went round. Then came the carving of the quarters, and they spitted morsels of lean meat on the long sharp tines, and broiled them at arm's length upon the fire. Polycaste, a fair girl, Nestor's youngest, had meanwhile given a bath to Telemachus, bathing him first, then rubbing him with oil. She held fine clothes, and a cloak to put around him, when he came godlike from the bathing place. Then out he went to take his place with Nestor. When the best cuts were broiled, and off the spits, they all sat down to banquet. Gentle squires kept every golden wine cup brimming full, and so they feasted to their heart's content, until the prince of charioteers commanded, "Sons, harness the blood mares for Telemachus, hitch up the car, and let him take the road." They swung out smartly to do the work, and hooked the handsome horses to the chariot shaft. The mistress of the stores brought up provisions of bread and wine, with victuals fit for kings, and Telemachus stepped up on the painted car. Just as his elbow stood Pisistratus, captain of spearmen, reins in hand. He gave a flick to the horses, and with streaming manes they ran for the open country. The tall town of Pylos sank behind them in the distance. As all day long they kept the harness shaking, the sun was low and shadows crossed the lanes, when they arrived at Pherae. There Diocles, son of Autolycus, whom Alphaeus fathered, welcomed the young men, and they slept the night. But up when the young dawn's fingertips of rose opened in the east, they hitched the team once more to the painted car, and steered out eastward through the echoing gate, whipping their fresh horses into a run. That day they made the grainlands of Lacedaemon, whereas the horses held to a fast clip. They kept on to their journey's end. Behind them the sun went down, and all the roads grew dark.